Appreciate that. Mr. Brock and then Mr. Alhassi on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. And at this juncture, the Conservatives will be voting in favor of the amendment. Owing to the technical difficulties experienced by my colleague, Ms. Block, and to complete the record, I wish to finish her thoughts. Whether it's their friends at McKinsey getting special treatment and receiving government contracts, or former Liberal MPs and future Liberal leader hopefuls like Frank Baylis, whose company got a massive contract during the pandemic for ventilators that went unused, cost the government hundreds of millions of dollars only to be sold as scrap metal. We've also seen the complete lack of spending controls on major procurements like the Arrive scam, an app that started with an $80,000 initial price tag but ballooned to at least $60 million according to the Auditor General. And every step along the way, this government has tried to cover up these consequences of their failed governance. They voted against the audit of the Arrive Can app, swearing that there was nothing to find. They swore there was nothing to find with the McKinsey contracting, yet each time malfeasance is found and has revealed a troubling pattern. Right before the House rose for the summer recess, it was reported that the government was purchasing a building right on Spark Street. No practical reason for purchasing this building was given in the articles, but they did note that, surprise, a good friend.
Sorry, Mr. Brock, we have a point of order. Mr. Jory?
My apologies, Chair. I believe we are debating the amendment to Ms. Vaniola's motion, and I'm trying to understand the relevance. I just want to follow, and if it's relevant, I'm sure you will allow it. If it's, we need to go back and focus on the amendment. I really appreciate that direction from you.
Yeah. Mr. Jory does have a point. We are debating the amendment, not the original motion. Perhaps if you just stick with the amendment, please, sir.
But did note, surprise, surprise, a good friend of the Prime Minister, Michael Pitfield, had part ownership of that building. Again, Conservatives are voting in favor of the amendment. Of all the buildings they could have purchased in Ottawa, they happened to buy one that directly benefits a close friend of the Prime Minister. Again, Conservatives are voting for the amendment. Now in New York, one of Trudeau's handpicked diplomats.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Mr.
Alhassi. You did point out correctly and accurately that this is about the amendment. So everything that the member is saying currently is irrelevant. Thank you.
He literally mentioned the amendment in the last 10 seconds.
I have. It's all irrelevant. I've got literally 30 seconds. If they want to continue to interrupt
They don't want
me,
to talk about Pitfield because Anna Ganney wants to be
up,
leader.
Mr. Brock, and then we'll go to Mr. Alhassi.
Thank you. Of all the buildings they could have purchased in Ottawa, they happened to buy one that directly benefits a close friend of the Prime Minister. Now in New York, one of Trudeau's handpicked diplomats just got a big upgrade in his residence. Trudeau has found it prudent to purchase an apartment on Billionaires Row for $9 million. Again, Conservatives are voting in favor of the amendment. Right. This is how Trudeau's chosen elite live high on the taxpayers' dime, at a time when Canadians are struggling to pay their mortgages or the rent. Again, Conservatives are voting in favor of the amendment. At a time when our country is seeing more tent cities cropping up across the country, at a time when 2 million plus Canadians are going to food banks to feed their families, and according to the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, more hurt is on the way with more defaults on the horizon as many Canadians are facing mortgage renewals over the next few years. Again, Conservatives are voting in favor of the amendment. Frankly, at a time when Canadians are living through housing hell, Trudeau is more interested in buying for and buying from his friends over delivering for Canadians. Conservatives believe that Canadians deserve answers, which is why Ms. Block brought forward this motion, which calls on the government. And I can't complete her thoughts on that, but that's my intervention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Barrett, then Mr. Brock.
Well, I fundamentally disagree with Mr. McKinnon that this is not an expense. His words were that this $9 million is not an expense, that $9 million in a cost of living crisis, in a housing crisis in our country, $9 million on a condo for Justin Trudeau's buddy Tom Clark, on Billionaire Row that $9 million is not an expense. Well, was it a gift? Because if it, where did the how did that purchase come to pass? I mean, just absolute fantasy along the lines of budgets balancing themselves. Of course, $9 million is an expense, and it was taken out of Canadians' pockets. It was taxed off of their paychecks. So, of course, $9 million is an expense. And I'm pleased that the chair did heavily coach the amendment, because in its current form, it's supportable, though it wasn't in its original form. But we want all of the information about this $9 million expense that taxpayers are footing for the luxury condo for Justin Trudeau's buddy, Tom Clark, living on, quote, Billionaire Row in New York City. And I hope Mr. Clark enjoys it until the day after the next election.
The concern that I have, if anyone, I'm sure we've all dabbled in real estate in our personal lives, if not professional lives. There's always a cost attached to any assessment of fair market value. No, I understand that, Chair. I just want to complete my thoughts. There's always a cost to obtain an assessment. So in the ordinary course of events, the Liberal government, an agent of the Liberal government, would have negotiated the purchase of this extravagant, ultra-luxury penthouse on Billionaires Row for $9 million. There may or may not be an assessment that was made privy to the agent who purchased the property on behalf of the Government of Canada. But unless it's in the government's possession, even if one exists, the author of that assessment, unless they are a very generous individual or company, is highly unlikely to release it to the government to comply with this order without a cost. So unless the Liberal Party of Canada, which is in a position to pony up for a potential expenditure to comply with this particular order of committee, my concerns are it should not fall to the taxpayer.
Mr. McKinnon, is your hand up? Or is this just from the previous?
Yes, I just wanted to quibble about Mr. Barrett's comments. It's a purchase of a liquidatable asset. It is owned by the Government of Canada. It can be sold at some point, and presumably the value recaptured. It is definitely not an expense by any acceptable accounting process. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. And I also would suggest that we should ask or invite our witnesses to leave if they don't want to stay.
Well,
No.
maybe save that for your committee, Mr. McKinnon.